Again, welcome to the Shop Talk webinar. Today we have Preservica with us, and they're going to share with us some innovations and a little bit of a look at Starter Plus. So you've had your welcome from me, and I'm going to be turning this over to the Preservica team and their guests, and then we'll have questions and answers and then announcements. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Sean. Sean?
Hello and welcome to today's Shop Talk, Accelerating Innovation in Digital Preservation for U.S. Government. I'm Sean Magali from the Preservica team. On behalf of Preservica, I'd like to just share that we are so happy to be a sponsor of the incredible work happening here at CoSA. We would also like to thank the CoSA members for their public service. We have a great session planned for you today, so let's take a look at the agenda. First, I'll introduce you to the newly expanded Preservica team for North America. Then we have some news and announcements to share with you. SERI Steering Committee Co-Chair Alejandra Moutenot will highlight the plan for CoSA's digital archive using Preservica's Starter Plus. We'll take a look at some steps you can start taking today to begin your digital preservation journey. We'll share some of the newest innovations we've been working on here at Preservica and how Preservica's user community is helping to shape this path. And we'll save some time at the end for your questions. As I mentioned, Preservica has added some new faces recently by expanding our North American team. Let me introduce you. Yes, I'm one of the new North American team members. I've been here for 3 months so far. In my role as marketing specialist, I focus on North America marketing and U.S. government. Gareth Bennett joined our team last year as product marketing manager. Also new this year, Elaine Beeler, our vice president of marketing for North America. For all demos or technical questions here in the States, our new solutions architect, Spencer, will be taking care of you. And our Vice President of Commercial Strategy, Gareth Aiken, has been working hard developing new innovations and will share some of that work with you today. The U.S. government sector is important to us at Preservica and a priority. Now I'd like to share with you a few exciting announcements. It's been a big year here at Preservica. Earlier this month, we had our first virtual roadshow event in Texas. This event included a panel of archivists throughout Texas's public sector, including representatives from the University of Texas Arlington, Travis County Archives, Austin History Center, and Texas State Library and Archives. We'll share out a link to the replay of that event in today's follow-up. Also, look for more events like this coming from us in 2022. There's a new way to learn tips and best practices about digital preservation directly from the Preservica community. We launched a library of how-to videos. This series of videos features records managers and archivists in city and county government sharing how they quickly and easily perform common electronic records preservation and access tasks with Preservica. These folks are all members of Preservica's online community, so it's also a great way and opportunity to network with your peers. We recently received a new investment. Preservica received close to $7 million in growth capital recently. We're obviously excited about this new funding, but we also think you'll be excited to hear about how we'll be using the new funding to bring you new innovations in active digital preservation. Our Preservica version 6.4 was just released. This new release adds automated capture and active digital preservation for Twitter. You'll hear more about this later during today's session. We also onboarded our 25th state archive, Louisiana State Archives, which officially makes half of the U.S. state archives trusted to Preservica. That's something we're extremely proud of. Now to today's guest speaker. Last year, Preservica launched Starter, which is our freemium product that provides everything you need to start preserving and sharing digital content for free. We also introduced Starter Plus, which is a paid version and has everything in Starter, as well as options for additional capacity, more users, and some additional features. We offered 10 free Starter Plus licenses to CoSA members as a part of Preservica's 2020 sponsorship, including one to CoSA itself. Today we have Alejandra Moutenot, the Assistant Digital Records Archivist at Massachusetts State Archives and the SERI Steering Committee Co-Chair, to provide an overview of CoSA's digital repository and the plans for the future. Alejandra, over to you.
Thanks, Sean. Today I'm going to be giving kind of a mini presentation of CoSA's digital repository, which uses a Preservica Starter Plus license. And I'll share with you what we've accomplished so far using Starter Plus and where we're going with the system. Next slide, please, which should be the documentary history of CoSA. So before I talk about the digital repository specifically, I just want to zoom out a bit to quickly introduce CoSA and its organizational history, because understanding that will give us a sense of its body of records, and that's what we're trying to preserve using Starter Plus. So if anyone here is new to CoSA, CoSA, or the Council of State Archivists, is a national nonprofit membership organization comprising the 56 state and territorial archives. And as you can see from some of the points on the timeline here on the screen, CoSA has been around for a long time, close to 2 decades. Its predecessor organization, CoSRIC, formed in 1989, and the name CoSA that we know today was founded in 2005. CoSA itself is run by full-time and part-time staff members, contractors, and dedicated volunteers from the state and territorial archives who sit on its committees and subcommittees. And this is relevant to the digital repository because CoSA's membership and participants are distributed and represent a bunch of different locations all throughout the country. So there is kind of a requirement for a repository infrastructure that can support remote functionality. So going back to CoSA's organizational history, CoSA has been creating and managing its own administrative and policy documents for many, many years. And that's not all. In meeting its mission to support the state and territorial archives in their work to preserve and provide access to government records, CoSA has developed and delivered numerous educational and advocacy resources and much more in various formats, increasingly digital. So these are things from bite-sized videos on electronic records topics to one-pagers on topics like facilitating administration transitions, to posters, to long-form manuals and guides, and much more. Throughout its existence, CoSA has utilized a couple of different technology platforms to collaborate on these projects, to publish these materials, and to share these resources. So the point here is that we've got a bunch of different digital file formats moving in and out of different systems. Fortunately, a lot of the groundwork in terms of preserving CoSA's legacy records has been done in partnership with our colleagues at the North Carolina State Archives. Next slide, please, which is the records retention schedule of CoSA. So speaking of this groundwork, CoSA already has a comprehensive records retention policy, which is what you're seeing on the screen here, that it follows. And this kind of brings us to what we've accomplished so far in Starter Plus. So for records that haven't yet been transferred to the North Carolina State Archives, active preservation is really a priority. And that's because I mentioned we're dealing now with a bunch of different types of resources in various digital formats. So we really want to make sure that we can maintain and access those into the future. The group that's taken on the project of administering CoSA's Starter Plus account is SERI's own Tools and Resources Subcommittee. And one of the first things that was accomplished using Starter Plus was to establish a hierarchical structure in the repository according to the existing retention schedules that you're seeing on the screen here. Secondly, Tools and Resources is currently in the process of putting the finishing touches on a governance policy for managing the repository and how we'll be ingesting records into the repository. And that plan covers things like who are the authorized users going to be that will have access to the repository. In a Starter Plus account, we can have multiple concurrent users, which is helpful to the Tools and Resources Subcommittee, so it's not just one person who's responsible for taking this on. The plan also covers what the various roles will be for those users. what the ingest policies will be, such as how frequently are we going to be ingesting records into the repository, and then also finalizing our metadata schema. So all of this preparatory work was really possible because Starter Plus doesn't require any configuration or client installations really at all. So we could spend the precious time we have as a volunteer group really digging into more of the intellectual, organizational, and arrangement decisions that need to happen before we start ingesting anything. And just to reiterate, SERI, for example, is largely volunteer-run, so it's important to have a system that is user-friendly and that is pretty much plug and play, and that's the case with Starter Plus. Next slide, please. So what you should be seeing on the screen here is a screen cap of what the public-facing front end of the CoSA digital repository looks like, with some of those big buckets or like top-level collections right on the homepage here. And getting started with this digital repository couldn't have come at a better moment for CoSA and for SERI. 2021 really marked a period of transition, and early into 2020 as well, marked a period of transition with respect to technology for CoSA and SERI. Some of you are probably familiar that CoSA recently migrated its website to a new platform, and as part of that, the SERI committees migrated to a new collaborative system for communicating and sharing documents. So the time was right, not only to centralize storage of these digital materials, but to do so in tandem with active preservation policies. And so that means CoSA and SERI can feel confident that when materials are published to the website, for example, that isn't the only location or system where that information is stored and monitored. So what's worked for us so far? Well, it's helpful that this platform is cloud-based, and that means that you can access it on the web using a number of different browsers. So it meets the needs of users where they are, and it doesn't require a certain operating system or setup that you need to install. It also is user-friendly, so that means that as new people join the committees and as our seasoned committee members transition off the committees, that doesn't complicate the process of having to administer this repository. As I mentioned previously, we're now dealing with a bunch of different digital formats. We're dealing with video, publication formats, poster formats, visual formats, textual documents, you name it. So having a system that's built on archival preservation standards and that automates migrations is helpful for a volunteer-run group as well. And then finally, having access to an active preservation community through community forums to ask questions of our peers, not only in state government, but in other sectors, is helpful as well. So the vision moving forward is that we're really excited to actually begin ingesting materials on a regular basis, to really put the finishing touches on that governance plan and to take the next steps with this repository system. So thank you to Preservica for its support for CoSA and for its assistance in getting us started with Starter Plus. Back to you, Sean.
Thank you, Alejandra. That was wonderful. Next, we have Gareth Bennett, our product marketing manager, who is going to talk to you about Twitter preservation. Over to you, Gareth.
Thanks very much. Excellent. Lovely to be here. So thank you very much for having me. I'm just going to walk you through today a very brief demonstration of our new Twitter preservation capabilities. As Sean had mentioned, this is a very new release for us. It came out in the initial part came out in November of this year, so we're only a few weeks into this, and we've got some wonderful customers out trialing it at the moment. And it's a fantastic evolution in terms of the different formats and data sets that we're protecting and helping preserve, as Alejandra was just mentioning, as they are forever evolving. So this is a new connector for Preservica, and when I say connector, that is in reference to connecting Preservica to different platforms, so the likes of Twitter, and we shall be having Facebook and LinkedIn and Instagram, etc. Those coming down the line as well in due course. And what Twitter is just an addition to our existing and ever-growing repository of different formats that we can preserve and we can help protect. And I'll also be covering a little bit later on in today's presentation some examples of the additional formats as well that we've been working on, and new renderers that we've been bringing to the table. So what this does in terms of our new capability here is ultimately enabling our customers to capture tweets as they are being created automatically, and ensuring that all the components of those tweets can be preserved and read and trusted forever. So it's quite an exciting advancement, and I know that tweets, particularly in government, are of increasing importance and use, and therefore by having something that does this, we can hopefully streamline the process and make it much easier to ensure that the permanent Twitter records, those of historical value or those that must be kept as per retention schedules, that we can make that process much easier for our customers. So I mentioned there about preserving all of the components, and this is one of the unique elements of the Twitter capabilities that we've just released. So some of you may be familiar with archiving or social media archiving, and this is slightly different to that. So this is ultimately ensuring that not only the text, but the image and video content and metadata content, which actually make up a tweet, so there's multiple components coming together to what you see on the Twitter platform. Each one of those parts is captured and can also always be read and used in the future, which means that each individual part has to be able to be migrated to the latest preservation format. So the imagery that could be migrated as the different format requirements change over time, or as the MP4 file, which might be a video that's been uploaded again, in 10-20 years, that can also ensure that we can have that migrated to the latest preservation format, so that ultimately at any point in time from within the Preservica repository, you can see, you can read that tweet as you would have been able to on the Twitter platform, as one single immutable record. So it's some quite clever technology behind the scenes to ensure that can be achieved. So I mentioned very briefly there in my introduction, the other element to this is not only the fact that we can always ensure that we can read these Twitter records, but the other part is that, of course, is being able to get to them. So some methods at the moment that have been used by people is that particular tools, they might be free plugins that are browser-based, they might be special archiving tools, it might be very simple as a screen capture and saving something as an image or a PDF. What this is doing is going straight to source via a connection to Twitter, to the platform, and capturing, as those tweets are created, capturing those tweets and bringing those into your repository. So saving an enormous amount of time in terms of the process of actually of getting them. It's out of the box and easy to configure, so I'll be showing that in a moment. And as part of also this release, we've launched where you manage this area, a new UI as well, which I'll be showing you. Now, it's important to note in terms of which Twitter records are we talking about here. Really, what the focus is on is the permanent Twitter accounts. Sorry, beg your pardon. The specific Twitter accounts which probably contain permanent social media records. So it could be those of elected officials or particular state agencies or local government agencies. So it's perhaps not some of the more transient stuff. It is much more about the important records that are being communicated by specific accounts and those targeted records that have historical value, or as I mentioned, need to be kept as per retention schedules. So without further ado, let's show you this in action and just very quickly introduce you to this new release. Okay, fantastic. Now you should all be able to see my screen if I hit this button now, and if you can't, please do let me know. So what I'm showing you very briefly, and I'll just walk you through, is our what we call our intelligent archiving engine. So in summary, this is a place where you can connect to different third-party platforms. So Twitter is one. When we roll out Facebook, that'll be another. It could be OpenText. It could be SharePoint. Ultimately allows you to set up a connection to that third-party platform and then define what information needs to be captured and brought into your repository. So I'll just walk you through very quickly that kind of process, show you how easy it is to set something up like this. So I can use an existing connector, or I could create a new connector and what we call a job, which is basically a task to go and capture tweets from a specific account. So if I go and grab this, I'm going to call this CoSA test. Okay, this is going to be my Twitter connector. Quickly just go through and tell it exactly where I want to put it. Go to my next step. Okay, and then all I have to do, so in 3 steps, I'm now at the place where I'm about to tell the system exactly which account I want to go and capture tweets from. So again, I'll give this a very simple name. So CoSA test, and then if I go to Twitter, and actually, as you can imagine, I've preloaded this, but the CoSA's official Twitter account, and quite simply, all I need to do is grab this, copy that, take this over here, paste it in, and remove that @ symbol, agree to the terms and conditions, and then if I hit this button, which I won't do because I don't want to start capturing their account, I don't need to be doing that, but if I hit that button, all of a sudden, the Twitter connector is set up, and then of course I'm also able to now immediately start ensuring that I can capture the tweets as they're created for the state for the CoSA Twitter account. And if I go back to this quickly into this job dashboard, I'll show you something. So if I go into the Preservica view here, so this is one that's running in the background for Preservica. This is the Preservica Twitter account, and you can see, for example, how many tweets it's been capturing. How many tweets have been on the account, how many tweets we've actually captured, if we've had any duplicate issues, if we've had any failures, when the next job will run, so when it will next go to Twitter and pull those tweets in. It's a very simple summary overview, but what I'm showing you here is a couple of things. One is the new user interface for our intelligent archiving engine, which is an indication of exactly where we're headed with our revamp of our user interfaces right across our product range, and then Starter Plus are already leveraging this as well. So again, it's all about trying to make it as easy as possible and as simple as possible and as intuitive as possible to do particular digital preservation tasks. So within 3 steps, you've seen me set something up, and the other part, of course, is the ability to quite simply connect to Twitter, select your account, and start preserving those important Twitter records. So that's the setup. If we go into my repository, so this is obviously in my demo environment, and what I'll do, and what I've done in the background is told the system where exactly to start putting these tweets. So I'll just go through to my folder structure. If I go on, click on here, and I'm going to choose Preservica as an example. So it's automatically created the folder structures for me, and as you can see, I started running this in November, as I mentioned when we first launched this. But if we go to December's tweets, that'll start bringing up some of these now. And if we have a look at, for example, here, so what we can see now, if I've just loaded up, so this is a specific tweet, and I'm just going to go straight in and just preview this. So here is the tweet that we've captured from the Preservica social media Twitter account. We've got all of the text information that was there. We've also got a video that was uploaded, probably by Sean, for this tweet, and I can see this, view this, and use it all inside Preservica. So there's no requirement to be connecting out to the Twitter platform. So what it means is that at any point of time in the future, I can always read this tweet, even if, for example, Twitter change how they lay information out, if they purge the system, or if it ceases to exist. And if I just hit this here, you should see, hopefully, there we go. You see this video playing here. So this video is now also playing inside Preservica independently. And this is a nice little demo video from one of our starter customers, Tina. So also worth a watch in the future if you fancy it. But so anyway, so quite powerful and quite important. And what I mean by the components, just to tie everything back together again. So if I go back to have a look at my tweet, okay, just go back into here, and I'm just going to go and show something. It doesn't look particularly appealing to show you, but I'll just explain what I mean by that immutable record. So here at the top is the asset, the whole tweet. So the text, the metadata, the video that you just saw. Okay, marked up here as the asset. Here you have the MP4 files. You've also got the text, so the subject matter that was tweeted. All of this is joined together and linked together as one immutable record. But if I needed to, or if I wanted to migrate this particular MP4 file to a preservation format, either now or at any point in the future, I'm able to do that. I'm able to isolate just that video part of the tweet and ensure that that can always be read. So what you can see in terms of here is now the ability to ensure that I got the tweet within my repository in a specific location. I can view that totally, I can view that completely within Preservica independently. I can ensure that each component can be preserved for the long term. And of course, if I choose to make any of this public as well, I can ensure that these are added to my public collections, and via our out-of-the-box online portal, then you can also be able to you can also read, view, watch those tweets as well. Members of the public can, if you choose to add those to your public collections. So if I just stop sharing, there we go. And if I hand back now to Sean, I believe.
Thank you, Gareth. And with that, actually, I don't have control.
I think it's to come to me now, isn't it?
Yep.
That's right.
Over to Gareth Aiken.
Just wait for control. I've got the little red square at the moment. It's with you, Sean. Okay, there we are. Right, now I've got to find the button to advance the slides. Where is it?
Should be there on the left. There's a black toolbar with up and down arrows.
Okay, I think I've got it. There we go.
Yep,
that's it. That's good. Thank you very much.
Thanks,
Thanks, Gareth, and thanks everyone for the time to talk today. Yes, you can read right there. I'm also Gareth as well. So we're like buses. You wait forever for one, and two come along at once. So anyway, why are we talking about Microsoft? Well, the reason why we're talking about Microsoft is because it's everywhere. As everyone I talk to, everyone in the industry is saying that Microsoft 365 in particular is being used by almost every organization. I remember there was a Gartner report last year that said that 9 out of 10 organizations were using it, and the majority of those that weren't were planning on doing so in 6 months. So I think it's relevant to discuss, because everyone will be in some way managing content and records, some of which will be long-term, some of them will be permanent. And that's in particular been accelerated by the faster pace of digital transformation that's happened over the last 2 years, in particular with COVID, with remote working, and being able to provide access, of course, to everyone to all the important information that's needed. It's generating more and more volumes of records as well within those environments. Interesting statistic about what's also been driving this with greater collaboration online, not just SharePoint, but within Teams. I remember reading that I think it was in March 2020, there were 32 million daily active users, and a year later there were 145 million daily active users in Teams. So it's a huge change, and with that, I can see we can see everywhere that organizations are investing or have already invested a lot in their 365 environment, in particular for how they manage their information, how they govern their information and their records management. So with that shift to 365, many organizations, you'll have active and inactive valuable content in place. And also potentially you have information that needs to be coming off expensive legacy systems as well. Other challenges, if we think about the value of information, so traditionally long-term information in particular has lost its value when it's gone past the point of where that main collaboration period is, where that main collaboration in use. And of course, if you don't have any effective preservation or archiving solutions in place, if you do need it in future, if it is long-term, has long retentions, or is permanent, you need it for something like a FOIA request, then it might be very, very hard to find. And if you do find it, it might be very, very hard to use. And in addition to that, if there is time and effort that's going into managing and looking after that information, how do you make it work for you? How do you continue to get value from that information for better decision making, for analysis, and so on? So that if that information is being kept, then make it work for you and make sure you get the most for that value. But that means it has to always be readable. So you need to think about how do you preserve that for long term. Finally, there are a lot of other solutions out there which will say they can help you. There are many which are very good potentially for backup. There are other archiving and migration solutions. They can work at scale, but they introduce new complexity. There's a lot of new tools that potentially you have to learn. You may have to re-implement, re-execute your IG or RM policies. May have to go to different tools to find the information you need. There may be coarse-grained levels of operation in terms of the types of retentions that are applied. And it's pretty likely as well that the majority of them will have no effective preservation beyond a bit level preservation. So your long-term content, permanent content, even if you do find it, as it were, to get it back, there's a good chance you won't be able to use it. If we look at the context of you and your organizations, if you think about the CoSA Move It report, what was reported, the results in that earlier this year, some very interesting findings came from that. 60% of agencies said that they did not identify, or did not know how to identify permanent public records. So going back to that challenge of higher volumes, if you've got more and more information in place, how do you classify and identify that information so that you can effectively manage it? In addition, nearly half, 42%, reported they didn't know how to transfer records to permanent repositories. So problems with moving that information into the right place so it can be effectively managed. And so these were your results. So lots of challenges out there, and with it, associated with those challenges, opportunities to improve that transfer, to improve the infrastructure, to improve the flexibility of the tools being provided. Now, Microsoft in 365 in particular has invested in bringing a lot of great new tools for use, and enhanced capabilities now in information governance and records management, a lot better than it did used to have a number of years ago. So there are opportunities to start taking advantage of this, and that can help also if you think about some of their classification tools they have for records identification as well. Doesn't address all of those challenges though. In particular, Microsoft say to us and to others that when it comes to long-term records and archiving, that's not really their sweet spot. So there are challenges still for handling that long-term information. And if you want to manage it within an archive, how do you transfer it? And how do you make it flexible and simple to use? So that's what we are looking at. We're looking to improve how our customers and how you can address all of these challenges by complementing your 365 investment and the processes that you're putting in place. That's interesting. This doesn't look like it's going to run the build properly, but I will just give you the overview here. So these are Microsoft pages. This is how they describe what they provide from an information governance perspective. So that's the context we're looking at here. And the tools they provide talk about providing better governance, managing risk and liability across a broad swathe of information that may not be records, but you may want to apply non-records retentions to them. And then you can refine that scope further where there's high value content that requires, as they say, their specialized workflows for meeting different requirements, regulatory record keeping obligations. And then with that, of course, this is where we really come into play. So where you've got that type of information, it's highly valuable, but it's for the long term, but it's permanent. There's the opportunity for what we call now preservation for Microsoft information, which is about automating the archiving, the preservation, and the authenticity of all of that high value, long-term or permanent content. So in context here, why are we doing this and how do we do this? So we're looking to reduce risk. Now, a lot of the benefits of a preservation system are around protecting chain of custody, providing access, and Preservica as a standalone application has done that for years. But now we're making it even simpler with flexibility in those tools we talked about a moment ago, not only in terms of being able to access that information within 365, but also if there is content that's come from some of those legacy platforms that you may have with important information that still needs to be retained, you can still find that information that's been sourced from outside of 365. So if you've got legacy file shares, network drives, whatever it happens to be, that can be accessioned into Preservica, and potentially you can still access that information through SharePoint search, for example, making it much easier and flexible for you and your users to find the information they need. As I said earlier, leveraging the investment that you make in 365. So improving the way that your life cycles for information governance by accessing what you have put in place within 365 itself already. So within governance and the compliance center and information governance tools and rules and policies, that's what you use to drive your preservation actions. And so you can use, in effect, the labels that you set up for managing your content to tell Preservica what information needs to be archived and protected for the long term. And we'll have a look at that in a moment. In addition, one of the fundamental pieces that enable this to work really effectively, especially from a simple and seamless set of integrations and in terms of improving the flexible tools that are available here, is auto-preservation. So we can prevent file format obsolescence and also importantly, proliferation. But now we can do it in an automated way. So Preservica can provide a layer of auto-preservation within the core application, where the policies can be defined by NARA, by Library of Congress, by Preservica. You can take our rules in place, or potentially, if you have your own requirements, you can make your own modifications. So you can set the rules and policies up so that whenever content is accessioned, the right rules are applied to that, the right preservation representations are created, the right access representations are created. And importantly, if the tools that characterize that information change, or there are a new set of rules available, or there's a better potential format for preservation over time, then automatically as those changes occur, then your information will be updated to the right and best formats available to protect and preserve it for the long term. And in addition, of course, we talked about high volumes of content. Well, those are potentially expensive if you continue to leave inactive content within your SharePoint estate. Extending SharePoint in itself can be quite expensive. So it can be more cost effective as well to manage it outside within a preservation solution like Preservica, but also to be able to access and find it when you need it. So within the context of your organizations, how might it be deployed? If you look to the right there, as we understand from organizations we've been talking to, particularly within some of our beta group, which I'll come on to in a bit more in a moment, it's likely that you might have a single 365 tenant across the state and all of the agencies in place. And that's accessible by the archive there. So that means all of the agency's content potentially can be set up. Now there might need to be a different sets of labels and rules and policies across different agencies, but all of those can connect to a single archive, a single Preservica tenant or instance. And likewise, you can see at the bottom there that that's all built upon the foundation of auto-preservation as well. And with our P365 in place, that's where we can able to provide our embedded preservation, so that your agency users only use the tools they're familiar with. It's simple to accession that content, either potentially using simple manual menus or the retention labels that you have already set up in place. And of course, you and your users within the agencies, if they have the permissions to do so, can continue to access and surface that information within 365 if that's what you and they want to do as well. As I mentioned at the bottom there, auto preservation is set up on that foundation with the policies that you choose, Preservica's, NARA's, your own, whatever it happens to be. Okay, now this should have a little video, but I'm wondering if it's in a static format. So I might actually take control of the screen so I can run it from mine, because it doesn't look like the video's going to play. So let me just change that to go back a slide and see whether we can do this. I share screen. Okay. Now I'm hoping you can still see that from before. Let me see if I can get my view back again. Sean, can you give me a nod if you can see that okay? Yep, that's good. Thank you very much. Okay, so I'm going to move on to the next slide. Here's a little video which is playing now, and this is a simple manual move. And I'll run it again in a moment so you can see what I mean. But this is what we're calling manual on-demand preservation. And what you saw there was a standard SharePoint site. And he was using the simple drop-down menu to execute a preservation action on that. And this can be applied through menus across SharePoint folders, files, sites, within Teams, files in there as well, within Exchange, and within OneDrive as well. So let me just go back and run that through again. You can see from the start, in this instance, it's picking, it's going into a file, using the integrated drop-down menu, clicking on the preserve option, stating yes, and pressing the button yes to confirm, and that's it. Now, what I've highlighted here is, in this instance, the document in question has been copied to Preservica. So assuming that that is a record, but there is a need, for whatever reason it happens to be, to keep a convenience copy within SharePoint for the time being, whatever that might be, because there may be still further discussions on custodial transfer of ownership, whatever it happens to be. Also, from a demonstration perspective, it's easier for me to show because the file remains in place, but it shows it updates the status as using the little padlock there to show that it's locked and there's a preservation copy of it there. If you were to use the move option, which the feedback from most of our beta users is the preferred and most commonly used action, or most likely to be used commonly, then move would mean that once that's applied, then that file would disappear from SharePoint. And there are benefits for that. It means it completely clears up your active set. It also means that it narrows and cleans up your search results if you're searching locally. But it does mean also, if anyone wants to retrieve that information, they can look more broadly and they can still find that when they want to. And I'll show you what that means in a moment. So that was the manual step. The next one is using labels. So again, these are just example ones that are set up for the purpose of this demonstration here, but you can see this is applying one of the example labels that have been set up. This one's called critical permanent, and this one also does a copy simply for the sake of making this demo easier to understand what's happening. And it was applied, if I go back to the beginning again, oh, too far. Try that again. Okay, that should run through. You can see information governance is publishing those labels. So they're your labels, whichever one you want it to be. You can apply a label at a folder level, of course, and it means that anything within that folder will inherit that label. So you don't need to do anything else to it. So if you've got a lot of content you want to move across, it's very simple. Labels applied and inherited by all of those files in there, and you can see there that they have all been preserved into Preservica. So this is described as semi-automated or fully automated. In this instance, there was a manual application of the label with an automated preservation action step, which then took that content and moved it into Preservica in a fully automated manner. The full automation would be if you were using, say, a G5 license with trainable classifiers or other auto labeling rules in place, in which case, if you've set those rules and policies up and you're happy with them, then potentially Microsoft themselves, using their state-of-the-art best practice tools, can classify the content for you. And if you have then identified that label as having a preservation action for it, then it means that content will automatically have that preservation action applied to it. And a simple way of doing things is you create your labels, whatever you happen to need for your agency, and all you need to do then is in a little Preservica P365 settings page, which is actually embedded within SharePoint itself. Then you can just simply say which of those labels you want preservation actions to occur with. Every time you create a new label and they're published for use within your 365 tenant or your SharePoint sites, then they become available. By default, there is no action applied to them. So information won't automatically start being preserved until you go and select which labels you want that to happen with. But that's as easy as it gets. You just need to work simply within 365 and using the labels that you have for your own policies in place. And finally, of course, if one of those files was deleted or you'd set up a move, but you still wanted to find it, well, if you search within that folder, initially you don't find it. But if you broaden the scope of that search across the whole of the SharePoint tenant, then you can find information that's within Preservica. So that means everything potentially which is available no longer needs to remain within your active set, but it does mean you can find it within SharePoint when you need it, if you have the permissions to do so. So again, I'll just run that for you. Simply, you can see this is a SharePoint site. It's searching for a document that has been moved. So initially, can't find that document. It's no longer within SharePoint. But if you broaden the scope of that search in SharePoint itself, then because of the way we are making sure that SharePoint knows where its information is, then you can find those files as you need, as long as you have permission to do so. So, as I said, so we have been running with this with a number of beta customers, and we've had some really great feedback. We've been really excited about the response we've had, and also we think the responses of those people who've been trying it have also been excited as well. So I think that the potential to help is quite significant. And this isn't just me telling it now, as you can see there. This is what our beta customers have been telling us. So reflecting that challenge of volumes of content, how do they transfer that information to the archive, to Preservica, or to the Preservica customers there? They have priorities to improve that manual transfer. Goes back to the challenges that were reported in the Move It report earlier in this presentation. A really interesting one here, which was reported back, is by being able to copy or move information in a simple automated way, but still search for it and retrieve it through 365, potentially gives the original owners of information comfort when it comes to custody and ownership transfer. So I know from many times over the years talking to archives that there are often challenges when it comes to, in effect, relinquishing information for archival purposes. And so this can potentially make everyone a lot more comfortable in that set of requirements. There's different ways of accessing that information. Also simplifies the processes. A lot of archives I speak to may have manual processes now where the requests come through. Archivists may need to download it. If you know you've got authorized users, they can potentially still access the information they need when they do, so that you as archivists can continue to get on with your other more demanding requirements. And in addition, all of the information that's in the SharePoint metadata, for example, all of that gets transferred as well. So there's a whole new set of contextual information that you can start to use and curate. So great new opportunities there. Other information that's come back which might be of interest to you, and maybe it reflects the challenges and the priorities of your organization. But what we've seen is 365 has information in lots of places. So what's most important? Where are the most important sources of records at the moment? What we're seeing is right now, it is where maybe you might expect it to be, SharePoint folders and files. But coming up number 3, there is SharePoint sites. And that's actually something which has been talked about consistently due to projects which have a temporary lifespan. When it comes to the end of that project, it's important to be able to close the site down, not leave it in place because it's just taking up space, it's presenting other information governance challenges, but being able to archive that effectively. And that's a common requirement across the board. And with it, you can see that teams, in particular teams, channels and folders, are starting to move up in the priority lists as well. Other summaries there's all sorts of labels in place. There's records labels with retention, there's non-records labels with retention and sensitivity. And you can see that records with retention and sensitivity labels are the expected or most likely to be in use labels of today. And the other thing we spoke about is, do people have content left over in legacy ECMs? And the answer is that yes. I mean, no one said no. The majority of people said yes, or if not, then maybe. And these are the broad range of solutions. But interestingly, even SharePoint, older SharePoint on-premise systems are still in scope there. So what do you do with that? Well, that's where it's appropriate to obviously take your active information. Maybe that can be migrated into 365, but the inactive high value content that we saw right at the beginning, that's the sort of information which is exactly right to put into Preservica. And I'm really pleased to say that one of our beta customers, Tanya Marshall from Vermont, has been very kind and given us some information which we can share publicly. And also I'd like to thank Rick Jerome from Vermont State Archives. I think he's also attending today as well. So hopefully everything I'm saying here, Rick, is correct, but please jump in if there's anything else you wanted to add. But reflecting those challenges, as Tanya described here, the overarching goals are around automating transfer, ingesting the archival records, preservation in place. So again, looking at things like the tools there, and integrating record keeping, metadata, and archival description and access. So around all the flexibility of tools, all those things we looked at right at the beginning. And I'm really pleased to say that Tanya was happy to go on record and say, as you can see there, that their experience so far shows that they're optimistic that what we're doing will help achieve somewhat or all of those overarching digital preservation goals. So I think actually I'm coming to the end of my slides, which means I'll need to hand back. But just in summary, maximizing that investment. A lot of time and effort is going into 365. Hopefully this is true of many of you here today. And this is hopefully simplifying that particular part of how you and your agencies are working and interacting between the archive and those agencies to protect that long-term information. We're making it as simple as possible, using your existing labels, making sure all of your information is readable with auto-preservation, and ultimately everyone that can find information you need when you need it, and importantly, where you're working, where you would normally work in 365 as well. And that, I think, is all I wanted to do. Now I just need to
Just from one Gareth to another.
It is.
So from Gareth A to Gareth B, and I will share my screen now. Thank you very much. Thanks, Gareth, for that. That was brilliant.
Thank you.
Okay.
Looks like you just need to skip through some of those slides.
Yeah, let me just come up. There we go. All right, so you should all be able to see my screen. So for the final section then for today's presentation, I just wanted to walk you through some of the other innovations that we are working on and advancing. Some of this has been underway, or some of this is out, has been recently released, or some of this is going to be turbocharged as well, as Sean was alluding to in his introduction with some recent growth investment as well. So this is an extremely exciting time. As Sean mentioned, I've been here for not that long in terms of Preservica's history, and it's full gas with some really, really exciting innovations, including what we've just seen from Gareth. So let's move on. I want to each slide I'll show you. So there's only a few. Has a little mini demo playing here. So I'd love to obviously show you so much more, and I think each one is probably worthy of a session in its own right. But I'm afraid I'll do my best to give it justice, to do them justice in the time that we have available. So one of the exciting things working on is, just like Gareth was talking about in terms of trying to ensure that we can streamline, automate the process of accession of content from particular agencies, state agencies, local government agencies. Another method of doing that, which is a little bit more manual, but again provides archives with the flexibility to potentially utilize both options in the future, is through a remote contributor form, a web-based form, which you're seeing demoed here. It's a very simple online form that's provided to the accessioning agency or to that stakeholder that you've selected and been working with. They can very quickly upload the content that they want to into a holding area within your Preservica repository, all through a web-based form, and again, quite intuitive. And what you can see in terms of the look and feel here, you've got the dark mode turned on here, which is again using our new user interface, so just making sure things looking and feeling much easier to use. And we don't want to have to try and train people to do things in a certain way. It's particularly if you're asking people to upload content, we want to make that nice and easy. And of course, once they've done that, you get control of what's been accessioned actually and pulled into your archive. So that's an exciting development. Been a lot of work going on in the background, and a lot of contribution from our special interest groups, so our customers that have come together. So thank you to all of them who've been feeding into our development process. So that's coming very, very soon as well. Okay, so this is another exciting one. This one, in terms of upgrading, so some of you may be familiar with our existing out-of-the-box online access portal, or universal access, we sometimes refer to it. And within our Preservica instances, from starter all the way through the range, you can ensure that your collections, your particular assets that you want to make public, you can do so, and you can do so out of the box from within Preservica. So, but what we do realise is that as times evolve, and as your, I suppose your communities that you want to engage with, as their expectations are evolving, as we're becoming all online, more and more online. The world of, for example, e-commerce and the expectations of your smart devices and the user experiences are evolving at such rapid pace. Obviously, we need to ensure that we keep pace with that as well. And this is where we've been throwing a lot of our efforts and focus in terms of upgrading our online access portal. Here is a very simple demonstration of some of the ways that you could present information, as Mona. But ultimately, it's giving more control to the archives of what you can share, so what's private, what's public, the information or supporting metadata that goes with that, who you can share it with, and also being able to customize as well a bit further. So as well as the underlying architecture and the underlying user experience is also being improved in line with much more up-to-date methods of navigation and finding information online. So this is quite exciting. I think this will be very well received as well. So another part, which a little bit more behind the covers perhaps, but keep this one very brief. So in respect to here, we're looking at being able to upload metadata in bulk. So you might have your metadata organized and stored as a centralized CSV file, and you might want to upload that at the same time as your content. So coming soon will be the ability to upload CSV, which you can see in this short video clip. And again, just giving you an advantage in terms of getting your collections ordered and up and running as quickly as possible. Here you can also see in terms of the demonstration, the new user interface that we are rolling out across the range. Okay, only a few left from me. So here, and we were talking, I was mentioning this in terms of Twitter, which being a social media records, tweets being a new format that we've brought and released to our customers. We've also been working very hard behind the scenes, and we try and do this every release actually, in terms of bringing new renderers and making new renderers available. So I was focusing on social media in my previous example where I was demoing but the many more complex digital formats, which Alejandra actually was referring to as well, increasing in volume that needs to be accessible in years to come. And these include books, 3D assets, websites, and caption video. And as I mentioned, 3D, you're seeing that on screen now. So this is actually a recording from my demo instance of a 3D asset there, and I'm just being able to interact and navigate that quite easily within a renderer that's inside Preservica, so totally independent. And our goal is to simplify digital complexity using Preservica's powerful data model. And there's one thing, here's a book on screen being shown, the rendering here. There's another thing I just wanted to quickly draw your attention to when it comes to complex file formats. So for example, we have video content with subtitles. So the ability to do that. So you might have more than one subtitle file that goes with it, and ensuring that you can watch that video and of course have the subtitle file attributed to it, and watch that as one, view that as one whole video, as you can do here. And our innovation team are currently working on the ability to actually search within the subtitle content, find a particular section and play the video from that section based on the search information that you've inputted as well. So just again, advancing the ability to not only view and render this kind of information and ensure that we can always access the subtitle information and files, and also always watch the videos, but also making it much easier to find this information and navigate this information as well. Okay, and lastly from me, we have hike files, which some of you may be familiar with, or the live pictures that you find if you're an Apple user, for example, or the Harry Potter images, as we've been referring to them internally. And this one again has been released. This renderer, the hike renderer, was released very recently, and it ultimately, what we're ensuring we're doing is that we are staying attuned to the ever evolving and more popular formats, and this is becoming a much more popular format. So pictures taken by members of the public, citizens, or by elected officials or agency representatives, whoever it may be, that information you may want to ingest into your archive and be able to access, and we're ensuring that we're on the path to help you do that. So it's one of almost 2,000 formats that we recognize. So there's a number of we're constantly evolving the types of formats that we can support and ensure that we can preserve and render. And we're trying to do that on nearly every release. We're trying to bring something out to support our community. So in terms of a quick update on some of the other exciting innovations that we've been working on, that's it from me. And then I believe we're on to the Q&A.
Okay, do we have questions? Thank you guys for a wonderful presentation. That was a lot of amazing information, and it gives everyone an opportunity to look at it and go, now what do I need next? So now we're to the question and answer part. So who has a question for either the Gareths or Sean? If you'd like to type it in chat, we can also, if you want, unmute you and you can ask, but what questions do we have? Any? It always takes everyone a minute to type their question. That gives, the new innovations, I think, are going to give people a lot of opportunities and things. So if they want more information, it'll be easy to contact you guys to get more details about what's being offered and what they can do. I'm not seeing any questions right now. Elaine, do you see any questions?
I don't see anything coming through.
Yeah, so that may just be that we don't, that they're just, let's go back a minute. Oops. There we are. Questions? Okay. Do we have some?
As you say, Lisa, maybe, I mean, if you just go to the next slide, you've got the contact information on there.
There we go. All right. There we go.
So if anything does come to mind, then reach out to that address and we can gladly answer those and provide some more information. There was certainly a lot delivered today, so hopefully just a flavour of the things we're up to.
Well, and it helps everyone as they start formulating their own needs to know what's out there and possible. Sometimes you don't know to ask for it because you didn't know it was possible. So knowing the possible is out there makes it great. And I'm just seeing that a lot of people are thanking you because of all of these wonderful enhancements that are coming. So we certainly appreciate all of that. So with that, I'll just take a minute here to remind everyone, I hope you enjoyed today's Shop Talk webinar. We will be looking forward to more of those next year, but our immediate webinars coming up are in January and February. So we'll look for the links for those so that you can sign up, and we hope you'll attend those. SERI also has their first webinar in January. And so again, going to the CoSA website is a great way to get registered. And of course, there's lots of ways to communicate with us at CoSA, and we hope you'll take advantage of the various ones. And if you're new to CoSA, go check them out and find out what's out there and possible. So again, I'd like to take another moment to thank everyone from Preservica for all of your help and support for CoSA. And we appreciate everything you do for us. And we hope, if by some chance you get an evaluation as you log off, we hope you'll take it, because that does help us as we prepare these programs in the future. So with that, I thank everyone for your time today. Gareth, Sean, Elaine, thank you so much and Alejandra, thank you so much for the Preservica team, and Alejandra for your sharing of what CoSA's doing with the Preservica Starter Plus. Thank you, everyone. Have a great holiday season, and we'll see you all back in January for our next CoSA webinars. Take care, everyone.